I would love for you to kind of like, first of all, tell me how you even got to, how did you get to know about Cameroon and traveling to Cameroon to get married?
Oh, so I was already studying black culture throughout the world, from Africa to ancient America to all the continents around the world. So I noticed that Africa, besides all other continents, that was the highest concentration of black culture. So my eye was on that. So I was interested in speaking with the people who were residents, or black people who were residents of Africa. So in college, I always stopped to talk to different African brothers and sisters. But to my surprise, I found that they didn't really know a lot about their culture, just a little pieces here and there. So, which
Mm-hmm.
lets me know colonialism set its foot in Africa very, very strongly, in Christianity and Islam and so forth and so on. I have a friend that you know as Justin, or also known as Akira Nihis El. He was friends with some African sisters and brothers, namely yourself, as well as some others. And he was talking about how good the food was. I remember that night. So he had me to come with him over to Laura's house.
Mm-hmm.
And I went there and I ate the food for the first time. I was like, wow, this is delicious. And I was like, oh man. So then he said that he was, he was interested into getting with the marrying into the culture and things like that. So I was like, wow. So I kind of wanted to you know, myself get deep as I could into the culture. And I was interested in actually marrying into the culture through a woman from there. So I ended up, one thing led to another, met a Cameroonian sister, and eventually
Mm-hmm.
we kept talking, and I went over there and did a traditional marriage in a village, in Guti. And it was one thing that I didn't like. I didn't like the Christianity that she was into. I'm not, I'm not into any kind of tools of colonialism. I noticed that a lot of people were Christians over there. I was very disappointed about that. They had thrown their culture away, and I respected the tradition. And you spoke about earlier, you didn't know why certain Cameroonians or African brothers and sisters were Christians, but they still practice polygamy. It's simple. I mean, the culture bleeds over into the culture overlaps into the religion, and so slowly but surely it will die out. As far as uh, the religion is concerned, eventually it will die out. The consciousness of our people are growing the world over, whether it be in Africa, America, wherever. The gap between African culture and Black Americans is slimming because we have social media platforms. We're able to communicate with one another and discuss ancient truths as well as culture, where we went wrong, what we need to do to pick our pieces up and rebuild our empires in a modern sense. And that's what's taking place right now. So I'm actually a part of that, those type of movements myself. Um, again, the African brothers and sisters that have all the organic foods and so forth and so on, though they are introducing GMOs over there, genetically modified foods, because of the traditional knowledge was killed and replaced with Christianity and Western education, which is very stupid. Um, Lacking in knowledge. A lot of our African brothers and sisters, they forgot how to eat according to their own genetics, which is different from any other race on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that certain races on the planet actually, and this is science, they can withstand more starch than our people. You see that? Our people cannot withstand starch. So adult people and even children, at that matter, should not be eating maize and flours and seed oils and all these and certain oils and so forth and so on. But should focus mostly on vegetables and the preparation of meats should be done either boiled um, or grilled. And so when you go back to the ancient culture, not so ancient, but before the transatlantic slave trade, you'll find that our people used to live hundreds of years old, like 120 years old, 110 years old, even older than that, you know. So now, because rites of passage is no more, scarcely practiced, uh, at the time of puberty, instead of becoming an adult, the children actually remain children and they start to age as in their teenage. So they call them teenagers, you see? And society just drew a line and said, hey, you know, when you reach 18 or 21, we're going to consider you an adult. You can get your driver's license at 16. You're mature enough to do this. But really, you have a lot of grown people who are still walking around with immature mindsets. So we have a lot of issues that we need to resolve. And what deems you intelligent is not solving other races' problems or other people's problems, but the problems of our own people. And that's how you determine and measure the smartness of a person.
So I'm gonna still take you back. You said you were so disappointed that your wife is practicing Christianity. So the question I have for you is, before you traveled to Cameroon, you were already in communication with her, right?
Right.
So you were already in communication with her, meaning you already knew she was a Christian or she was practicing Christianity.
No,
Knowing that she was practicing, okay, what
no.
did you say? Did you say
During the communication with me and her, I could tell that she was a person that was unsure about anything. She wasn't sure about necessarily. Her mother was practicing Christianity, but she was pretty much unsure of, you know, Christianity, and I don't even think she goes to church to this day. But she was pretty much unsure about Christianity, or you have some people that have not found themselves or have not settled for any specific religious belief, but they've just been told things about maybe Christianity or raised in a church, but they don't really implement it in their lives. So I felt that maybe perhaps I can reintroduce her own culture to her, in which she said that I probably knew more about our own culture than she did. In a general sense, I did. That I could actually introduce that to her, but she did not. What I did not know is how deeply embedded colonialism was in her, through the educational system and her faith and belief in her own culture and people. That's what I didn't know, how much it was deteriorated, um, and I didn't know how much people there, how they value the American system.
was practicing Christianity because her parents also practice Christianity? But the question I was about to ask, which you already gave an explanation, but I still have another question for you, which you already gave an explanation that you still kind of like went with the flow of things with her because you realized that she wasn't like really sure of who she is, you know. You thought you were going to kind of like really introduce her or teach her her own culture, but you realize that she was so embedded into the white man's culture or colonialism from school. So, but the question I want to ask you is, do you think that if you would have gotten to like know her better, these things even before marriage?
If I,
This is
I mean, I some a lot of times people like to ask the question and say, if you could go back, would you change anything? I wouldn't change anything. I don't think that, in truth, in you're looking at it from a universal standpoint of view, that there's no such thing as a mistake. I mean, everything in life is a learning lesson. Specifically speaking, um, do I think that that if I could go back, first I wouldn't change nothing. But if I was in that position and I, let's say, got to know her better, I think I probably would have did the same thing because of my mindset and my maturity. It's some certain things that I didn't know, I didn't learn as a man until I got older. You see that? And those
Mm-hmm.
things were to take your time. Um, but still, if you were to take your time, you still have to have the maturity to know what to look out for. You see, because if you don't know how the
Mm-hmm.
maturity to know what to look for, you still won't be able to see anything. So time really is not the factor. It's more of the knowledge or the wisdom that I, my level of wisdom that I had then, and that's the importance of rites of passage. It's so much that young boys need to be taught that they're not learning. And rites of passage, which actually rites of passage is from what, 3 years old all the way to like 16 or 17. It's not like a month. It's a long time with true rites of passage. So it just it was meant to be that way. If you want to call it a mistake, then okay. But those things were meant to be made. Um, because I wouldn't know what I know now, and I wouldn't be able to relate to other people who are making those same mistakes. Not necessarily going to, let's say, across to another country, but they're making mistakes right here in America with
Mm-hmm.
different people, and they don't know how to approach one another. They don't know how to choose one another. You have to know and have or have the knowledge of your culture, know who and what you are, what you stand for. You have to know what life is. You have to know what soul is, which is character. You got to know what mind is. You got to know what God is. You got to know what the ancestors are. You have to have a whole value system. You have to have civility, morality, hygienics, everything based on you and your culture, not something that you learn in school, which they're not teaching a lot of stuff in school. So culture is very, very valuable. That is the reason if you fall if you fall and skin yourself up, then it teaches you a lesson. So I take those scars and bruises and cuts that I have gotten, I take those as trophies and gifts of wisdoms and blessings, so that I will be able to utilize that to teach others. And it has helped me tremendously, which is why I was able to write. So currently 3 books, soon to be 4 books, and I have some more books behind that that's coming.
When you first arrived in Africa or Cameroon to spend time with her and her family, and I'm assuming that was when you got married to her traditionally, right?
Um, I was actually looking forward to get involved in the juju and all that stuff. I was looking for that, and see, you see your facial expression. So a lot of people that way they look at like, oh my God, they're scared of that. But when you come to a place after being kidnapped in the transatlantic slave trade, our people over here suffered genocide, slavery, and they're still suffering genocide and slavery, especially of the mind. You realize how much you lost, and you like, oh my God, now I know what to value and what not to value. You see that? If you never
Mm-hmm.
been and had these privileges here, you will run to here. So people value and they're willing to leave all their culture behind. But I've seen the best of both worlds, you see. So I'm able to say, I know how to do it. I know how to implement the best of both worlds in a safe and healthy way. So if I could go and uh, well, I wouldn't say if I could go back. I would just uh, I would just try to teach my brothers and sisters never let go of your culture whatsoever, cultural dress and food and so forth and so on. But you said something else. What else did you say that you expressed?
Like, was there were
Yes.
like
The
were there any cultural practices or tradition that caught you by surprise?
when I got to the village, I almost went through a cultural shock. when I was in a village because that's my first time going through that. I It's like you can't identify with anything that you're familiar with.
Okay.
So when I walked in the yard, people was hugging me. I could They couldn't identify with anything I was familiar with. So I was like, oh my God, I had to stop because it wasn't like a panic attack, but it was more
Mhm.
like I had to really, take
Mhm.
control of myself. So I was like, oh man. So I think that's pretty much what it was, but not in a
Okay.
negative sense, but because I couldn't identify with anything. That they call patrol there. You don't see anything. Only thing I see is black people and they got African wear on. The house looked different. I was in a village and they cooking
Mhm.
outside with three big rocks with the pan
Mhm.
outside and people are swimming in the river and the creeks and taking baths in the rivers and stuff
Mhm.
and I'm like, I wasn't as used to.
So, what were like the major cultural differences in your marriage that you weren't prepared for? Because
Hmm.
I know you said, I know you had mentioned that, I mean, you realized that your ex-wife embedded into colonialism. But even at that, I still believe that there were probably some cultural shock that you weren't prepared for.
Um,
So were they any? I mean, that's just like a question to kind of like know.
I think that my inquisitive mind, because I moved. A lot of people say I have a strong zeal. So before I even went there, I've already asked her 1 million questions about culture, and she was explaining this, explaining that, explaining this, explaining that. That they eat with three fingers, they eat with this, the fingers and stuff like that. So I was already familiar with that. They practice that in Islam a lot, I think. So it's like I was pretty much I pretty much was familiar with what to expect. But like I say, when I got to the village, I couldn't even see my hand in front of me. It was so dark. But when I got to the village, I couldn't identify with anything. Like I seen a pineapple growing out of the ground right there at my feet. I was like, wow, I never seen that before. Or the about 10 feet away from me, I seen a tree that was growing plantain. So things that we normally buy in grocery stores here, you can see right outside, in your yard growing. You see that? And I
Mhm.
was not, I wasn't familiar with it. I also drank palm wine. I was thinking that it was going to be sweet, but it was actually bitter. They said at a certain time of the year it is sweet, but
Mhm.
I never tasted it sweet. So, um, one thing that stood out too is that the family structure, as far as if you have, you know, father, mother, and then you have like five siblings, the oldest represents the next in charge under the parents. That becomes the father if it's a male, and then the next person has ranking, over the rest, and then the third child has ranking over the next two, and then the fourth child has ranking over the. And I found that I was like, wow, that's very very potent, and it makes a lot of sense. It's actually a science in it. However, it can be very dangerous if the family has accepted colonialism, because if white man teachings gets in the minds of those siblings or corruption, they can misuse that power. You see that? Because they're no
Mhm.
longer in their culture 1000%. They're no longer in their spirituality 1000%. That means that there's no more morality, there's no more civility. You see that? So that's what corruption comes in the misuse of such a structure. You see that? So that's why the solution for that, I told her, the solution for that is you don't you cannot have the respect to be the top ranking person in a family uh, if you don't utilize that area wisely. If you don't have civility and all that, you don't have to have, you can't have the respect that goes with it. In other words, just because I'm the president, but if I'm evil or corrupt, I should not be respected. You know, I should be respected only when I'm moving in my role properly. You see that? And that's to be determined by the elders of the family. And but you know, it was. I remember I had to give a diary price, and I had a diary price, so that was something that was new, as well as I had to. One family say, "Oh, we did not eat," and if they didn't eat, then they threatened juju. So you know, everybody ran out the village. I didn't care. I was over here in America, but I wouldn't necessarily say I didn't care. But I did send a diary price for the father side of the family too. I did
Okay.
find so, but you know, it was the cultural aspect and the juju. I actually was for that. I actually did not want that to die. I was proud to see those brothers still practicing juju. I was interested in it, though I know they would not teach it to me because they look at me as probably a foreigner or somebody like that, or maybe I would give it to white men. And one thing that they were not all Christian whatsoever. So in the family it was a mixture of people. The elder brother was all traditional, and the other people was all traditional. Where these people are about Christianity, namely the women, but a lot of the men, most of the men were traditional, and I like that. And they even one of them spoke like over 30 languages, literally. I'm not joking, over 30 languages, and he had the gift of learning language just like that in months. Bakweri, Bamileke, Basasi, Bafut, uh,
Mm.
Baying, everything he could speak it. He spoke so much. Bantu, he spoke so
Wow.
much. He spoke all the different. He even speak Chinese, French, English,
Wow.
thing. Yeah, he spoke everything. And when anybody gets sick in the family, his first suggestion is to take them to a healer. That's
Mm.
his first suggestion.
So how did um her family, right? How did her family react to your marriage or your relationship? Were there any expectations from you? How
Um,
did her family, how did her, in short, let me say that again. How did her family react to your relationship with her? Like, how was their reaction?
I think that when I was like,
Mhm.
so I was so let down for a second. I was like, oh my God, I came all this way, and I'm like, wow. So as we spoke, that kind of went out of my head, and I realized he was just basically expressing, how he felt when he saw me about my appearance. So I'm sitting there with him and all these people walking around in there. I'm like, why are you just walking around looking at us? And they start putting food in front of us. I'm looking like, okay, wow, this is African food. I want to taste it. It grew up, it came from here. And and I was eating it. It's the way he was looking at me. Like I don't know what I'm doing. But I didn't I think he had cow, what they call stripe. And I didn't,
Mhm.
it's cow skin, and I don't eat that. So I ate the greens out of the eru with the I think he had either Gary or Fufu. I think it was Fufu. And I started eating the greens out. I was eating, it was good. It tastes so good. So um
Mhm.
but so all of a sudden he was like, he said, take my chairs outside, remove these chairs, take them outside or whatever. I mean, it was amazing because it's like everybody just stopped what they were doing and just did exactly what he said. He's had so much power. I never seen that before. Over here in America, it's like, fathers will say, hey, go do this. Nobody will listen to them. Then eventually they'll move, and so it's like the cultural aspect is they put a lot of emphasis on respect. And it's a lot of emphasis on respect. That's what I noticed. And so
Yeah.
everybody moved everything outside. He and I began to talk some more, and he asked me. He said, if you want to tell something to your black brother back home, he said, how do you do so when you're speaking white man language? That's what he said to me. And I'm like, we have our ways of saying things. He said, I don't believe that. So I explained it further, and he said, I understand now. Because we have our
Mm,
way of whispering and saying different things and putting things certain ways and stuff like that. So he said, oh, so then he let me know about certain black authors about in America. He had read books about black history and culture. And I was like, wow. So he was very educated. But I noticed if he was not a traditional man, he would not have picked those books up to read them. He would have stuck with
mhm,
Christianity and stayed blinded by something that was foreign to him and his people. You see that? And
mhm,
um, and it's not Christianity or Islam or Judaism that's Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are nothing but corruptions and watered down information from ancient African stories and teachings. Because we're not saying that there was no such thing as a Jesus who did not speak English, whose name was really Yasuf, and what he taught cannot be found in the Bible. The travels the different areas of the planet that he went from Egypt and all these other places, that was true. But Egypt, there was no Christianity being taught in Egypt, you know. But we could talk
mhm,
about that another time. But the philosophies and things like that that those people was teaching back then, in those days, you were either Roman, in the Mediterranean, or you was black, and he was a black man. He was definitely a black man, and he did not teach Christianity. Christianity didn't even exist. But he was teaching culture and different aspects of culture and inner teachings of what you would call today African culture at its highest caliber. Going back, but eventually I asked him about, well, when are we supposed to get married? Like, how does this? Because in America, you just go to the courthouse and sign the paper and kiss each other or have a wedding and everybody go to church. But there, he said, don't worry. He said, just sit back and watch how things unfold. So what I
mhm,
noticed about the African traditional marriage is it's like a process instead of it's a process of stages, and it could last 2 or 3 days, you see, not just like 1 hour. So we had to go through a process of these people came from different areas, and the elders met inside the house. It was older people in, and they would come out and they would hand us a gift. We'd shake the hands. You have to shake the hand by holding your arm, like this, and you shake the hand of the person and thank them, for what they, gave and stuff. And I just, what I also learned and noticed that being in Cameroon, in the village, it made me realize this. And one thing I could say, the hospitality was out of this world. It was magnificent. The
okay.
hospitality was magnificent. It was so magnificent that I was so embarrassed. I was saying,
Mm,
please don't let these people come to America, because these people here are not going to have any hospitality like that. Nowhere near it. Not to say people here are low down and mean, but they're not going to have
mhm,
the hospitality that people they was having there. I mean, the woman that I was with, she took my shoes off. There was another girl preparing my food. Somebody else was washing my clothes. It was like this was unreal. This was like a movie. So I was like,
mm,
and even one of the girls who was smaller than me, her last name was Ekoko too. I don't want to say her name, but
mhm,
she was carrying my suitcase, and the suitcase was very heavy. I'm talking about it was something I was struggling with it, and she was carrying. I said, "What are you doing? Don't carry my suitcase." No, she said, "No, I must do it. You are the guest." Like what? Say I didn't. I felt bad, but the hospitality was out of this world, and I'm much wiser now, and how things turned out is how they turned out, and everything that happened has already been written by the Most High, what you refer to as God. Everything was already written. Your whole life is already written. It's the experience that needs to be gained. The knowledge
mm,
of your life is already known from start to finish,
mm,
but the
mm.
experience. So because I went through that experience with that experience, it has catapulted me and gave me so much wisdom on so many things that I've been able to touch so many people's lives on many
Mm.
different levels, whether it be African brothers or African American brothers.
You mentioned that you were so impressed that your ex-wife's your ex-wife's elder brother knew so much about America because you found out that, oh, he told you he read a lot of books, right? About
He mentioned
America.
authors in those books. Yeah.
Yes. And and he wasn't practicing Christianity.
No, tradition. Actually, they was going to set aside a
Practice like the
tradition.
African tradition. So
Yeah.
so the question I have with the question I have, how did you feel that um like after you got married to your wife, because you were hoping that you had a conversation, you already knew she was practicing Christianity, although she didn't quite know what she was doing. But you realized that, how did you feel when you realized that some of these differences started to, like the differences on your beliefs, how did you feel when your differences started to cause like tension in your marriage?
Um, like I said, she never really. I never seen her practice Christianity. I actually never seen her practice Christianity. She did mention to me she don't know what her mother would think because I brought her mother here too. She don't know what her mother would think if she know that she's not going to church, you know. But I mean, when she was here with me, she didn't have a problem with not going to church. I didn't say you can't go to church. I didn't say that to her. I just don't go. You know, why do I need to go to church and listen to another man tell me something that I can't tell myself? I have a connection with God myself. I don't need him to tell me anything. You know, I'm a
Okay,
teacher myself. So
okay,
I didn't it wasn't too much of tension as far as differences. Like, oh, we were bumping heads because she has a Christian outlook. She didn't actually express a Christianity outlook. She didn't
okay,
express a African traditional outlook, but she did say that she didn't really believe that Africa was going to ever rise again. She thought that the cultural aspects was over and it was all colonialism has already destroyed everything, and that was her outlook. So she just the problem, the clashes was my zeal and her zeal did not match one another. She didn't have the same zeal that I had. She didn't have a zeal for and a value for the African culture, and that's what I noticed in a lot of our African brothers and sisters. They don't have the zeal in the culture. They don't value it, you know.
okay.
Not all, but most that I've came across.
So was that why is this like one of the reasons that led to you guys to your divorce or something different?
No, I think that led to that divorce. Um, you know, I'm just looking at the essence of it. I mean, what they call that in court and law, something, some type of differences or something, um, irreversible differences. I don't know what they call it, but we just
Okay.
had, yeah, it was just, but the essence
In
of all that, because she's,
Go ahead,
huh?
sorry. Yeah,
So
you guys had some differences.
yeah, but it didn't have anything about the fact that she was over from over there and I was from over here. It's just that um, you know, we just had different value systems. You know, I valued the culture and the language. I kept pushing, hey, teach the children the language. She wouldn't do it, you know. So
Mhm.
it was almost like I loved her culture more than she did. So my
Okay,
whole thing, I seen salvation through my ancestors' way of life, and she didn't. She saw salvation through just Hollywood and living over here in America and things like that, which I already know where that will lead. And but she did express that I did a lot for her. She said I taught her a lot, she learned a lot, and I did a lot for her. And so I'm not saying that she's a demonic person or whatever. I'm not here to try to bash anybody. I'm just
I mean, differences. I mean, you have differences, you have differences. It has nothing to do with whether she was bad or not. Like you said, both of you had different values. And usually when people, from my experience or my personal opinion, usually when people have different values, that can cause a lot of conflict in marriage, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't necessarily mean she is bad. I mean, if you have to ask my personal opinion, I would say you didn't spend enough time to get to know her and her own personal values. Because I mean, usually people make decision to get married to one another when they get to know those people. They know what they stand for, what they believe in, and you know that okay, this is in line with what I stand for. And like I think we can be a good pair. But I think for your case, like you mentioned earlier, even even if you had to like really take your time to get to know her, like you mentioned earlier, you still probably would have gotten married to her. Meaning that with you, you believe in a way, um, having that constant communication with someone to like probably teach them to understand things. But again, you know, it's really kind of like if you ask me my personal opinion, it's hard to change an adult. It's hard to convince an adult who is not willing to be convinced, you know, unless, and usually if, I mean, from your own personal experience, you can tell most of the African brothers and sisters who are beginning to go deep into our ancient African tradition, they didn't do it because somebody tried to talk them through about it. They did it, most of them are doing it or did it because of their personal experiences and what they learned due to the experience they had, you
Well, she
know.
did show interest. She did show interest in what I was doing, though. She
Yeah,
did
because
show interest, but
yeah, she wasn't
it
interested
it gets complicated.
she wasn't interested anyway from start. She wasn't interested anyway. You are the one who didn't at first didn't believe that she wasn't interested. She wasn't, from what you're telling me, she was never interested from the first day. She didn't pretend about that.